Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the TSM University Q&A series. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Remi, freelance tournament organizer based in EU, to get a couple of questions out. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind that if you want your questions answered, join up in our Discord, discord.gg/TSMU, find our Q&A questions channel, dump your questions there, and we'll make sure to ask them to Remi so you can get your response. But for now, Remi, welcome to our Q&A series. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Well, thanks for having me. Hello there, everyone. And yeah, how am I doing? It's pretty wild for me. As I was saying, sort of behind the scenes, it's 2 a.m. for me. So it's interesting to be that late for this event. But yeah, I'm looking forward to questions, and I'm looking forward to answer some of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us gamers, 2 a.m. every once in a while, we've all had our all-nighters, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but I wanted to start off with some casual questions. And first of all, what is your favorite game? What is your favorite esports title and what do you prefer to play the most?
That is the most difficult question nowadays for me, because if you asked that question me like 2 years ago, I would have said without a doubt League of Legends, and there was really nothing to like no game that would contest it that
Mm.
had any esports potential at all. But right now, I would more lean towards Rocket League, since this game is just more fun to me and easier to understand from the viewer's perspective, which I think is the most important thing to look out in esports. But yeah, like I would say Rocket League, but I still have like the place in my heart for League of Legends.
Mm. Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. Well, I've played Rocket League maybe once or twice, but 2 hours total, if that, right? But I can look at a Rocket League event, and when you look at the mechanical skill involved and you see the energy, it's absolutely insane. I want to say it's almost on par to Smash Bros, but like you said, it's even easier to understand. It's cars and soccer. Like, what is there to get confused about?
Exactly.
Yeah, so what I guess I could say, or I guess I should ask, what brings your favor to League of Legends, or what started League of Legends as your most favorite game?
Um, I think this is like the dedication I've put into this game. Like I've had a
Mm.
lot of friends playing, and I was looking for the game that like sort of suits my ability to play with my friends. And yeah, I sort of stuck with that. And this is like some sort of addiction. And since that game was constantly updated, and it's still constantly updated, the graphics are better, the new champions are there, the story is actually getting better and better. This game actually has a proper lore right now, and that lore is expanding a lot. I think this is the biggest factor for me that kept me going there, and the esports potential that is constantly growing, expanding to new regions, and not only regions but separate countries as well, like we have in Europe, with the ERL system as well. I think this is the thing that sort of keeps me going, and that changes my perspective on the League of Legends as a game.
Mm.
And this makes this game like still have some special place in my heart.
I'm definitely on board with you in terms of lore. I love storylines, and I remember at the 10th anniversary announcement, there was an announcement for an MMO, and I'm very much hoping that the MMO dives into a lot of the lore because I remember in the really, really, really old League client, they would release weekly like lore snippets, um, and they got rid of it in favor of having champion biographies. But an MMO would definitely flesh out the world.
Yes, exactly. Just as Arcane did, though it wasn't like partially connected to the lore, and it's not like canonically right, but we all can agree this was great to have implemented in the storyline.
It definitely was really good. I don't know if they're gonna wait, did they announce that it wasn't canon or is it like it was just very clearly not canon? Because I'm not familiar with League lore
I
in
don't
terms
think
of
it was
song.
announced. I don't think it was announced, but I think
Okay.
that there's a lot of clear differences that are like like you cannot compare it to canon and what happened canonically.
Fair enough. And then last casual question before we dive right into the professional questions is Do you do anything outside of esports? Do you have any traditional sports that you play, or do you like to read, go hiking, etc.?
I don't actually. I don't do anything besides esports right now. I am currently studying at the University of Wrocław. I study social project management, so
Mhm.
this is sort of connected to organizing events, organizing tournaments, etc. But yeah, I am not doing anything besides esports currently, which is both good and bad for me.
In the sense of in the sense of you being on the grind and putting in the work and the hours, definitely it's going to be an awesome payoff for sure. And I'm honestly the same. Like I have some side hobbies every once in a while, but I've been doing a lot of esports things recently. So I'm on that same boat with you. And finally, speaking of esports, since we're all we can segue that in. How did you get your start? You mentioned Rocket League and League of Legends and how you put in a lot of effort into both of those games. How did you start working with those games?
Like maybe like the first thing that got me hooked up in esports is actually like from the viewer's perspective, because I think that if you want to work in esports, you have to like first get the hatch in terms of like being a viewer and experiencing the esports from the viewer's perspective.
Mhm.
And I've got myself that hatch right when around season 4 worlds, after season 4 worlds, or it was 5, I don't remember exactly. The OG Sports fight might kill me because it was after the SSW skins were announced, and
Mhm.
my friend was trying to convince me to buy myself the SSW trash skin because he was saying that this skin was awesome, and I was that trash main back in the day, and because of that, he actually like started teasing me some esports clips, and that got me hooked up, and like I started like thinking to myself, well, I like to work with my voice. I like esports, and I like the emotions that are like set up with esports. I was big fan of Freak back in the day and his casts, even though his casts are not considered that good right now by many members of community. And yeah, my first experience in esports was actually by casting a small regional tournaments.
Okay, so you started off with casting, and that was your segue in. That I am I'm talking to speaking to Amir right now. Actually, just 2 years ago when Valorant released, I loved watching it and then immediately started casting, and that's how I've gotten in. So brothers in that sense. That's awesome. Did you do color casting or play-by-play casting?
When I started, I was a hardcore play-by-play caster. Like I could solo cast like 5 games in a row, and my voice wouldn't die. Like the same day, at least. We're not talking about what happened to my voice next day, but yeah, it happened. But like during my career in casting, I
Mm,
switched sort of to color cast since I've started understanding the game more, and I've also
mm.
become a coach for one of the teams, and I was coach back in the day as well.
Yeah, we mentioned that beforehand as well. You did a little bit of coaching and a good bit of managing. And so, do you feel that the casting aided you in understanding the game, or vice versa? You were becoming more understanding of the game, and so you applied it to casting and you made the transition afterwards.
I think this is sort of interchangeable. Like
Mm,
one thing, like affected the other thing as well. It's like so
mm.
both things affected each other
Like
at the
a
same
circular.
amount. So like this wasn't sort of like there was no domination from either side.
Mm, interesting. That's I see that pattern a lot as well. Many casters, many managers, many coaches tend to try to fill the other roles as well, and it does work out pretty well, I want to say, for the most part.
Yes, for the most part, yes.
So I
Like
wanted to ask.
after you realize that you actually have difficulties with keeping up with your initial talent. Like for example, it was
Mhm.
very difficult for me to keep up with the play-by-play capabilities, and
Okay.
I sort of fell off with the play-by-play.
I don't think I could. Or how should I say this? I've casted League of Legends once or twice, and I've tried to play by play it, and the chaos is so much more than I cast Valorant, right? And so you get a first person perspective most of the time, and so you're fine to isolate a single player. But in League with the bird's eye view, it is I mean, much respect to anyone who can keep track of all the abilities getting thrown and the names. I mean, how many champions are we at now? 147?
164, I think.
164? Wait, I actually need to Google.
Yes,
How
I believe
many?
it's 164 or 166 right now, but I am not sure. So you have to multiply everything. You have to multiply that number times 4 or 5 if you want to count the passives names. So this is like almost like 700 names you have to remember, and also actually not times 5, times 6 because of the champion names as well. So you have like almost 1000 names you have to remember that are unique. You have to add the item names on top of that. So this is just crazy. This is just the nomenclature, just the wording itself.
It's yeah, it's an unending amount. I mean, what is nice is the game, Riot does a pretty good job of keeping champions on a meta rotation. So for example, you're more than likely not going to have to memorize half of those champions because they're going to be completely unused. I mean, when we talk about the meta, it is a lot of the cast definitely doesn't see the light of day. In ranked, it's a completely different story. We'll see some very different picks, but when we're looking at the top teams play, it's I want to say a very rigid format with the meta.
Yes. Though you have to take into consideration that there are some players that tend to go for certain picks. Like for example, you have OTP Kindred player that doesn't play anything else, and you have to take into consideration that, well, you have to learn Kindred mechanics. What are the passives? How does it work? And what are the key points in the gameplay that you have to take into consideration that are very different from the normal pathing, for example, for any different jungler. So there's a lot a lot to think about.
And also to get the exact number, so with Belveth, it said it was 160 champions, and then I think what was the new champion that came out right after Belveth? Was it
Nila, it was.
Nila? So 161. So there you go. It is wow. We have reached that's enough League of Legends. You know what? Let's stop talking about League of Legends because there's a reason why I stopped playing. No, but I wanted to talk to you about what you're studying in university. Specifically, let's just ask the question this way: what is your educational background in?
Well, as I mentioned, I am currently on the verge of finishing studying, of graduating management of social project management. I don't know how it's called in English. It's something like that.
Mhm.
It's just organizing projects myself, and this idea of this studying of this subject being my main course of studies is something that was with me from the very beginning, and the very first project I've created was actually the like 2 days after the start of the first semester, which was just creating the university team in League of Legends and start competing in the qualifiers for the university league in my country. That's happened by the end of the month. And what was crazy is that we almost qualified for this. It was like one team fight away from qualifying. But yeah, this was the first project, and this team actually made it possible for me to expand this project into the proper esports society we have right now, with 3 games being played, and and a lot of members that are playing other games as well that are not like assigned to proper teams because we cannot field them, and there are no competitions that are being held in my country.
Hmm. Understood. I want to ask specifically about the structure of, I guess, clubs or I, to my understanding, you refer to them as societies. For the esports societies, how would you say is the presence specifically? I believe you said in Poland, and I guess across Europe. I know for a fact that CS:GO, for example, has been popular for the longest time. But would you say that a large amount of universities have esports societies, or do you think that they're sprinkled in between? Not as many.
I wouldn't say that there's a lot of universities having their esports societies, esports clubs. There is still a lot of countries in Europe specifically. I will be talking from the perspective of Europe because this is like my field of studies. and I have the best like understanding of this region. But yeah, this is something that needs to be like diverse into other countries, because if we are talking in general, I would say that Europe doesn't have that many universities that have their clubs, their esports. But if we diverse it into countries, then we can say that, for example, in the UK, you have a lot of universities that have their own teams in various games. I think UK is the most developed scene in Europe by far. Like every single game has its own competition. Like you named the game, there is a competition for that. For example, there was even a competition in Genshin Impact, a game that really doesn't have this many field of competition at all. So this is the craziest part for me. Like the runner up in this title is Germany, for example, but it's miles ahead.
That's really interesting. Genshin Impact Tournament. Where do I sign up? Because I don't want to pay for. I can't put any more money into that game. I need to start winning some tournaments. Wow, that is. I see your point then, because to even have a game that isn't based on PvP or multiplayer interaction, to have some level of competition is definitely speaks to how developed they are and understanding the demand. I see. And do you feel that there, so for the events for the rest of Europe, do you feel that remote events are generally out of UK, or are those still staggered across the region?
That's a tricky question. I mean, like all of the events, like you have the core games that there are events being held in. Like for example, there is one organization that is like creating the like the official championship events in League of Legends, for example, in Europe. And this has been a case for quite a few years actually. And there are, I think, 22 countries that are like partner with this organization. There is like a proper tournament. There've recently been a LAN tournament held in Madrid, and it featured one organization from Netherlands and one organization from Poland playing in the finals. So I'm still a little bit sour because we've lost in the finals. It was a full best of 5 game, but we've lost. So yeah. And yeah, there are like 2 organizations in Europe that hold different events, but generally speaking, like you have 3 games, or I would say 2 games that are played on the international level, with the proper competition being recognized, with the proper tournaments being recognized as those that hold the European Championship title itself, which is League of Legends and Rocket League. Those 2 events, those 2 tournaments are being right now on top.
Okay.
But it doesn't change the fact that there are games that are trying to get there. Like for example, Valorant is trying to get there, but it's still quite a bit behind compared to other games.
Of course. Do you say that there's, for those to develop, the other titles to develop, would you say it's a matter of time or a matter of infrastructure?
I would say it's both.
Both.
It's
Fair enough.
always a matter of time. Like everything you ask yourself, it's always a matter of time, no
That's true.
matter what you think. But infrastructure is also needed there, because like there's a lot of countries that don't even have the league in Valorant. So how do you actually want to get those teams to participate in these events if your partner countries don't even have this proper event that teams can qualify through?
Interesting. All right. So that's kind of the summary of competition and tournaments and events. I want to pivot to the different perspective of how did you get your first opportunity to run a tournament? Because we were talking about how currently right now you're freelance tournament organizer. You have a lot of knowledge across the region of course, as you've just displayed. So for the students right now watching that may want to get into tournament organization or event organization, how did you take your first steps?
Right. So I will like describe my first opportunity I've got, but just to clarify the very first thing that might be confusing for the North American audience, which is in Europe you don't have this collegiate scene developed that much. We do
Mm,
have the amateur slash semi-professional scene more developed than
mm,
the scene that is collegiate scene. So naturally, like for example, for me in Poland, naturally I would rather look towards the amateur slash semi-pro scene rather than organizing something on my own on the collegiate scene.
mm,
So having that out of the way, my first tournament that I got hooked in was a semi-professional league in Poland, which was at the time was the second highest league, right below, rather Ultraliga, which is the main national league in Poland.
mm,
And the way I got hooked into this was that I've noticed that there was a lot of problems mm, with the broadcast itself, with the system that was being used, and basically the lack of casters as well. So I've messaged the admin, the head admin of this tournament, of this league actually, because this was a league, and I've asked him, hey. So as you know, I'm casting a lot of tournaments as well, and I know this guy that is casting right now, and he's solo casting. Maybe I can like jump in and help him out with the casting. This caster also knows me because he was my apprentice at the time as well. So yeah, he agreed. I've casted there for a bit. I've been casting there through the entirety of the season because this was like in the middle of the season. I've been helping out with all of the standings. I've been helping out with the statistics of the games because this was also a thing that was missing. I was verifying all of the standings. So basically, I was doing this from my own will. I wasn't asked for this. Like I wasn't even discussing this fact that much with the head admin,
mm.
and that's how I got in touch with him. And for the next season, I got actually asked by this guy whether or not I want to help him run his own tournaments, and that's how I like sort of got hooked up with the amateur slash semi-professional scene in Poland.
Hmm. That So you had previous experience while you were in college, but as you've said, collegiate scene is not very much developed at all. And so diving
Though,
in,
yeah,
yeah.
this is very like a paradox of some sort because I say that collegiate scene is not that developed, but without my involvement in collegiate scene, I wouldn't have been able to actually go into amateur slash semi-pro scene. I was just this lucky to have proper people that like sort of boosted me upwards.
I think even in the in North America for the initial stages of Valorant before broadcasts were super heavy and the infrastructure was stabilized, there was kind of that, I want to say, environment as well, where small universities maybe every once in a while would have a tournament, and then there was also the free agent semi-pro scene that would kind of pluck cherries from anyone who worked those university events. I can understand and relate to that landscape, and definitely also you working there in the amateur leagues just bolstered your experience without a doubt, right?
Yes, like definitely. And there was a time where I got sort of drunk, if you can say it like that. I was drunk with the experience. Like, look, I am on top of the world right now. I am someone, and I was completely wrong. Like, even though I got there, even though I've been working there, I still knew. I found out the hard way that I still have a lot of things to learn, and this came back to be like a track later on.
Interesting. The what was the proverb? Wow. One doesn't want to be a frog stuck at the bottom of the well. But I mean, you were still definitely working on larger scale events. You were talking about national level university events. I mean, those are still huge, but at the end of the day, it's also the ability to self-evaluate. I mean, that it sounds to me it came very much in handy for you because you were saying that there was still much to learn.
Yes, like there was like again, I've been talking about the factor of time being always the case. So always there's never the case you stay like you get to yourself and you say that there is nothing more to learn for you. You always learn something, even if you, whether you like it or not. It's just the way that world works.
There's a Master Yi quote similar to that. I don't know. I don't remember the exact words, but the greatest something about the greatest master being an eternal student.
I don't
I
recall the quotes.
I I've heard it enough times from being farmed by enemy Master Yis, but that's besides the point. I wanted to ask you, in this time, you actually mentioned someone you had as an apprentice. You've mentioned head admins for tournaments that you've spoken to. How important was networking for you in terms of climbing up the ladder and taking better jobs?
You always have to keep an eye out the context with others. Like, this is such an underrated statement, such an underrated case. Like I've said before, if I didn't stumble upon the good people, I wouldn't have been nowhere near the thing that I've accomplished. I wouldn't have accomplished anything actually. You
Hmm,
always have to like look out for the networking. It's such a great value to have.
absolutely. And then, do you personally have any advice for networking? Do you have a specific strategy, or do you let things flow naturally?
I am more of the natural way
Mm.
enjoyer, let's say it like that. I don't think there is any certain strategy needed. Like, let's just go with the flow and just be nice to people and try to contact with them, look for the opportunities. Just don't stay in the same place, because staying in the same place might be good for you, but it can also be deadly for your career later on.
Fair enough. I've heard the advice consistently, and so I just want to continue to drive the point home because sometimes networking can be a very confusing process for students. But what you're saying is being genuine, being real, and not putting on a persona, not being, as they say, fake, is the most important aspect of networking. Is that's basically what you're saying?
Yes, you can say it like that.
Yeah, perfect. Just wanted to drive it home because I think coming out of collegiate, a lot of students they are trying to find their footing, figuring out the direction where they want to go. Of course, those who have been leaders in the collegiate scene over here in North America, they might have a few connections here and there, but obviously everyone, as you said, we're all learning something or we all have something we lack. And so in the aspect of networking, it can be confusing. So knowing that everyone should be genuine is definitely at least something to anchor on. Now, moving forward, I want to ask specifically about the skills in relation to tournament organization. And you, of course, are studying program organization or management. For someone interested in doing tournament organization for esports, what skills do you recommend that they improve on or acquire?
Patience.
Patience.
I
Okay.
think this is a very important thing to have, to
Mhm.
master, because I don't want to offend anyone. Just saying, like,
Fair.
from the tournament organizer's perspective,
Mhm.
players are always the worst.
Yeah, I've heard that perspective before.
Bizarre cases you have, the amount of bizarre stuff, situations that are happening, you can see it a lot as a tournament organizer, and you cannot count them off. Like, you think you have everything properly prepared, you have everything properly planned, you are prepared for every single outcome situation, but you still happen to have that one player that completely throws you off guard, and you have to improvise. So you have to be patient, you have to remain calm and collected, and have that in mind, that there are also always players factor that has to be dealt with, etc. Like, you can look on Twitter, like there is a lot of tweets from various tournament organizers. I like to give the example of Rocket League and their LCS admins when they are posting from time to time the screenshots from their qualifiers and their screenshots from the logs, from the chat logs on Smash, and the amount of messages that are there are just bizarre. And this is just on a day-to-day basis if you're a tournament organizer.
I've also heard some horror stories with tournament organization where players have slept through their matches or have come in late or reschedule without letting a tournament admin know. Have you ever had any specific instances of those as well? Like, has a player ever fallen asleep on you? Is that a common occurrence?
I didn't like experience this myself, but I've seen this was the most bizarre thing ever. I think I've ever experienced. And I was on the LAN tournament in Poland. It was last year, last November, I think. And there was that one guy, that one top laner. He is still playing, though he's not getting any results, sadly. But he had himself a quite good reputation. And I remember that since this was like one of the first LAN tournaments in Poland past COVID, so every team that got there was actually partying a lot because this was like the first opportunity to meet each other. And this guy was this drunk and exhausted the next day on the finals day. You could see that he was so wasted. He was basically sleeping in front of his PC waiting for the games to start. Like there was you have to understand this was so loud on the venue, and this was such a small venue. He was sleeping in front of the PCs. And the most bizarre thing to me was that he woke up, got into the game, picked himself Trundle with Ignite top lane. He completely demolished his opposition and actually won the games and won the series. Like this is just too absurd for me.
That is, he can truly say that player can definitely say that they win games in their sleep, I think. Yeah, that's I've heard many people say it, but I think that's the only player that's actually done it. Which is, I mean, it's impressive. I don't know, it would, if I was on a team and that was my teammate, I'd feel a lot of anxiety personally, but definitely I would say it's
There is
impressive.
also one thing, he was not using his headphones at all. So I don't understand how he was able to communicate with his team there, but he apparently did somehow, and he won this game.
Fair enough. I mean, they're sitting right next to each other. That's not really a viable strategy to communicate, but I'm sure they figured something out. I uh I wanted to ask you, since while we're on the vein of tournament organization, before we go too far away, from the planning phase of a tournament or a league, all the way until payout and closing, what does that process look like for you? What tools do you use? How do you organize yourself and get that tournament off the ground? For example, do you use maybe a spreadsheet to organize your planning? Do you use a Word document? Do you do a specific bracket system or website to get the bracket in order? How do you do it?
Like it depends on the tournament. Like of course I do have like my own system that I just like using, but there are a lot of systems that are just better. Like for
Mm.
example, if you're running a Rocket League tournament, it's just better for you to make the system the most automated as possible. So you just go to Smash, although it's changed its name. I don't know. I don't remember the name right now, but I still call it Smash.
Start GG.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it will always be Smash,
Fair enough.
and yeah. But other than that, it's just up in the air for me. But yeah, of course, you have to like prepare yourself a list what you have to do, what you have to um, be on the lookout. What are the things that you have to like prepare before the tournament?
Mm.
And there are of course very like important keys for you to actually take into the consideration while organizing the tournament. But like just sticking to that whole process, I think it's more the most important thing to start with a organizing like asking yourself a question: what is your audience and what is your player base you're aiming with the tournament towards? Because the audience and the player base you're aiming towards, you have to properly adjust the communication towards this group. Because if you fail to do so, if you fail to address them properly, you might end up with either players not willing to play in your tournaments and the organization not willing to go to your tournaments, or viewership just not being there. And let's be honest, if you have the competition and if you have the other tournament that is happening in the relatively close timing to yours, you are not always going to have the upper hand, and you will always have to take into consideration that the players might not choose your tournament. The other important part is to gather yourself a proper crew, and this might be tricky because we had this questions and these talks around the world a lot with the certificates as well that were supposed to help us, and I think that certificates are good to have, like those esports certificates that were in the past that were so memed upon. But yeah, I think that having the proper crew, the crew that you can sort of rely on, is the most important part. And I'm not talking about the crew that is supposed to run the broadcast for you. I'm talking about the organizing, the administrative crew, the referees, the people that will help you with the socials. This is a very essential thing for you. And without this crew in advance, that are aware of the goals that you've set yourself with the first question you've asked, which is why you're organizing this tournament and who is going to be your player base and your viewership, your the people that are watching your stream and your tournaments, you are not going to get far.
To reiterate and to maybe give a more a concrete perspective on what you were talking about with the goal setting and understanding your audience, we could, let's say, pretend like we have two possible tournaments and two possible audiences. Let's say creating a tournament for gold elo players versus creating a tournament for masters and above level players. The prizing for the two tournaments you would have to outline differently. The dates would have to change because there's probably a lot of larger events for higher elo players to participate in. So you need to balance the dates. And then, of course, dealing with rule sets on uh, how strenuous you want the rule set to be. So maybe a higher level player would want to deal with a more strenuous bracket format where things are best of 3, best of 5s, whereas if you're dealing with a lower level tournament, they might just be fine with best of 1 single elimination, right? To give that example out there, would you say that theoretical would be a solid reiteration of your point?
You can say it like that, although just to clarify, I wouldn't organize myself the two tournaments at the same time
No,
with
no,
those
of
heroes.
course.
But yes, if you take into the consideration the fact that you have to you have to create the rule sets, rule books for those events slightly differently, because you can allow yourself to have the different regulations for the lower elo and the more strict regulations for the elo that is above the average elo, and yeah, that's very important to have.
Yeah, because you'll see it all the time. And for examples, if anyone is looking for specific examples, I think you can search on StartGG or Battlefy for any League of Legends tournament for that's open to low rank players, and the prize pool is of course going to be maybe $100, $200, but then a lot of the proving leagues and tournaments are up to $5,000, $10,000, if I'm not mistaken. Like that is just alone a vast difference between tournament organization, and then the rule sets are of course out in the open to view as well. Would you say those are good resources to study the differences in design for tournaments?
Generally, yes, but you still have to take into the consideration that not every tournament is properly organized, I would say.
Fair
Though
enough.
Though you have to take into consideration that you have a lot of tournaments that like sort of steal their like each other parts. So you know that some of the rule sets, rule books are going to be copied alongside the other tournaments. This is just a common practice, and you cannot regulate that.
Which is fair enough at the end of the day. I mean, because those rule books get to like what 10 pages long sometimes, you sometimes even more.
Yes,
Yeah.
the longest page I've got involved in was 27.
Okay, yeah, that's almost that is a novel.
27 page for a Google document.
Fair enough. And so, oh, we're already at 40 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun, Remy. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to ask you before I send you off, what has been the proudest moment in your career? What has brought you the most joy? I know earlier you were talking about how you felt on top of the world at a certain point, but give it to me straight.
I would say that it happened today actually.
Really?
This is the most bizarre part. Like throughout my career, as I mentioned, I've formed out this team, this esports society at my university, and one of the very first player, actually the very first player I contacted was the Urgot One Trick that had some esports experience in the past. He was a coach in the female scene for past 1.5 years, and he was willing to quit esports because he was so fed up with it. And right now he's a coach in Ultraliga and across the Europe right now. So this is crazy. And also I've got my team, like my very first team I was manager for, and one of the star players there was like a newly scouted guy, and he was back then like just a star. He was way above everyone else, and we were trying to promote him as high as possible. And right now, seeing him succeed, getting MVP after MVP, and being considered one of the best mid laners in the league, and them actually winning their first ever best of 5 series in playoffs, advancing to the playoffs in the first part was crazy, getting the miracle run, winning 6 games in a row against even the Titans with Agorok, with Promiscu, the infamous MSIU champion. And yeah, they've beaten him. Yeah, I mean, this is just crazy. Like when I've seen them first winning their last game and advancing to playoffs to land last week ago, it was crazy. And seeing them today winning their first series, it's a feeling you cannot describe.
Well, congratulations to both you and the players, and I hope you get to ride that high for as long as possible because you're I mean, you've spoken it all out today, but you are definitely putting in the work and you guys are, I mean, I'm certain there's a lot of good stuff in store. But
Me too.
for now, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the TSM University Q&A with Remi, freelance tournament organizer based in Europe. We've answered all of the questions that you guys have asked. If you want to get any more, you could perhaps reach out to Remi. Remi, if anyone has your Discord or your Twitter or they find you, would you say that your DMs are open to any questions?
Yes, completely. If you have any more questions, if you have questions specifically towards like tournament organizing, I am free to answer them. Like you don't have to have any questions like related to tournament organizers at all. Like I know, like I've mentioned this a lot, and if you check my Twitter, you see the very first thing that comes to your eyes is apart from the Pikachu picture, that is my avatar, is the question Polish Jack of all trades. And since I was a caster, I can help you with casting, as I was doing so for the TSM University Discord a while ago. Yeah, I can help you with like how to manage deeps, and I can help you with coaching, with basic coaching, of course, because I am not like educated enough on the basics, since the games revolve a lot. Like I can help if you have questions. If I cannot answer the questions, I can direct you to proper people because, as Saul Goodman says, I am the guy who knows another guy.
There you go. So Remy's DMs are open. You guys heard it here first. If you want to continue to watch TSM University Q&As, make sure you drop a follow at the channel you're currently watching from and join up on the Discord, discord.gg/TSMU if you haven't already. Folks, for now, we're going to have to say goodbye. Stay tuned for announcements for any future streams. Thank you.